Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Fridays Dire Literary Series, complete with 1980s Backwoods Hat. And tonight, our feature is Shane Griffiths. And we are really looking forward to hearing her read from her work and having a little chat with her. Let me do the proper introduction. And the proper introduction is pretty like her bio is right on her website, which is sbgriffiths.com, and you want to find everything you want to know about Shane, it's here. But just to paraphrase here, Shane serves as professor of English and teaches creative writing at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting name of, never mind, it's an interesting name of that town. So she's written her debut novel, Borrowed Horses, came out into that won the 2014 VCU Cabell First Novelist Award. She released 2 works in that wonderful year of 2020 when books were just flying off the shelves. Right. The Heart Keeps Faulty Time and the novel Scrapple. And her latest came out in 2022. And it is a book of essays, and you can pick it up. I love people endorse Bookshop, and Bookshop is here, and her book of essays can be found right here, and it is the sum of her parts. So definitely check that out. And without anything else from me, let me turn it on over to Shane.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And yeah, so this is the new collection. It just came out this past May, and I figured I'd read a short essay from it, and then we can talk and you can ask me all the questions you want to know. But this is a question. This is an essay that was actually, it's one of the few essays I've ever written that was asked for. In fact, I'm trying to think if there's another piece of writing that I've ever done that I was, asked to write. But this was one that in 2020, one of my favorite lit journals, 7x7, was looking at how to respond to some of the way that human rights seem to be being restricted. And so they asked for essays on that. And so I wrote this one called Idaho 1994. In Idaho in 1994, you believed you had never met a gay person. You were in college then, and you wondered how you would act when you finally did, whether you'd be weird about it. You hoped not. But in Idaho in 1994, homosexuality seemed to you a foreign thing. You embraced the acceptance abstractly, an easy belief that had not yet been fully tested. In your contemporary literature class, you sat in the middle of the room. To your right were farm kids, recognizable by their quilted flannels and worn Wranglers. You watched for the cute guy wearing a sweat-blackened, scab-colored Redskins cap that testified to years of unwavering fandom to a team you loathed. You disregarded his poor team choice and saw the cap instead as a hopeful sign of a more general fidelity. Its brim broke through a frayed woolen edge, revealing the white plastic form that gave it shape. To your left were the Lady Stoners. Their thrift store clothing and broken down boots spoke of another place entirely, one that salvaged Idaho's textiles and reinvented them into something wild. You'd stare at the green moon tattooed on the back of one girl's neck. You envied her overalls and the bravery it took to wear her hair unwashed, pillow coiffed. You envied, too, the tall girl you often saw rolling and smoking cigarettes on the steps of Brink Hall, listening to the old professor playing bagpipes on his lunch break. They were cooler than you, that much was certain. They walked into the classroom like it was the cheapest dive bar in the state. No one there could say a word to them. Except that wasn't true. Not in Idaho, not in 1994. She came into class one day, the tall girl who rolled her own. She was not crying, but had cried, her eyes puffy and red. The moon-necked girl asked what was wrong. The tall girl said that another kid from Salmon, her hometown, had called her mother and told her that her daughter was gay. Her mother told the girl, her daughter, that she could not come home again. Not now, not ever. It wasn't that her mother didn't love her, though that seemed an issue still up for debate, but that she was certain that her daughter would be killed now that the truth was out. Her home could no longer be her home. It was Idaho, 1994. Richard Nixon would die that semester, as would Kurt Cobain. You sat between farm kids and stoners. You were neither. They had seemed so untouchable, the cool group of girls whom you now recognized as gay. The internet was being built, and though the lab computers did not yet connect to the World Wide Web, they could connect to each other through a classroom server, through a campus server. For the first time in your life, you were responsible for reading discussion posts. On the class forum, one of the farm kids commented that there were more slang words for penis than vagina, and the tall girl countered with a list of vulgarity that was itself an education. You wished you were as bold. You wished they would allow you into a conversation, invite you to share a joint, but you always had that thing in you that people recognized as other, not farm kid, not stoner. That year, a guy who you had known as first chair flute from your high school band would attempt suicide, unable to reconcile his Catholic faith with his love of men. Tony, you would ask, realizing that you'd always known. In another year, the manager at the store where you worked would be arrested for assaulting an Asian man, a stranger on the street, for no reason that he, your manager, would specify. 4 years later, Matthew Shepard would die on a Wyoming fence. There are days when 1994 in Idaho feels like forever ago. How could you have been so naive, so oblivious? You've changed in the years since, learned, grown. You thought the world had too, but this is another thing you were wrong about. Now, 20-some years later, the fabric has worn thin, and you see Idaho, 1994, peeking through its weft and warp. You see the old, hard, white hatred that you first became acquainted with then. It pushes through, giving this moment its shape. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that wonderful essay. And that is Barbara comments that isn't today the anniversary of Matthew Shepard's
That's
death?
a good question. I don't actually know the date, and it may well be.
It might have been calling to you.
It could be. I'm driving through Idaho right now as well, so I thought I had to read it in my home state.
So what I'm thinking too is this book of essays, the sum of her parts, basically essays, they're linked essays about women's body parts and the role they play in society and used for political ends. Did you write one essay and be like, hey, there's a theme here, or do you have the theme in your head to link them and then say, this is a book?
Yeah, they all started as separate essays. And it wasn't until much later that I thought that there might be some thematic links between a few of them. And when I started going back through, I was like, oh no, there's thematic links through lots and lots of these essays. And so I had taken essays that I'd kind of amassed over years. And then once I had the kind of core idea that it was going to be about both body parts and the parts that women play, then I could kind of riff off of that and create the final essays to complete the collection. But yeah, that's how it started.
And why do you think politicians play so much with women's rights? It's almost like the dog chasing a tail for votes, and it just goes round and round.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like at this point, it feels very baked into the system. But
aren't there just as many women voters these days than male voters? Or maybe obviously there's something wrong with the system.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think people always vote just on strict gender lines either. So it gets complicated real fast when we bring in all of the various beliefs that people hold about any number of things. And then you throw in the economy and so forth. And I think sometimes I don't know, it's not unusual, I think, for us to vote against our own interests from time to time. But I think one of the other things, one of the other frustrations I get is just how bifurcated American politics have gotten, and how little conversations there are going across the aisles. And I really would love to see like more actual earnest attempts to work together and get some things solved in the country. But that may be neither here nor there.
Is it too broken at this point?
I mean, I probably am speaking outside of my depth. I don't know. I still tend to be hopeful, though. I feel like there have been other times in this nation's history when things have gotten very, very broken, and we've found a way out in the past. So hopefully, if we examine, I don't know if we need to go back to the Teapot Dome scandal or times when the Supreme Court voted through laws that segregated school, or that enforced laws that segregated school, and look back and see well, how did we get back from that into a more healthy place? And is there a way that we could do it again?
In terms of this latest book here, I just asked, I'm going to try to turn the question a little bit.
Sure.
Could you have written and covered everything that you cover in this book of essays in a novel form or short story format? So why did you choose the essay format for this?
Yeah, I think the essay format does something different for me than a novel does. I think in any kind of creative writing, it's a way of working out ideas on the page. But in novel writing, it feels much more hypothetical. Whereas if I'm writing an essay, it's generally based on something that actually, happened to me, or I witnessed, or something like Idaho was in 1994. That's a witnessing one. But there are other ones, like the essay that starts the collection is about a time when a grad student who I had never worked with before comes up to me in the hallway and was kind of berating me about my absence policy. He was thinking about taking a class, but he wanted me to change my absence policy before he enrolled. And he started talking about another female professor who he'd had before, and he called her a nasty name. And I was like, whoa, like he uses this epithet to me. And I was in this conversation, and I just was like, I don't know you, and I don't know what's going on about you. And it launched me into this, thought of where does this word come from? How is it, if it struck me that the C word had been more and more popping up in conversation. I actually looked up the Google Ngram viewer, and I could confirm, yep, it is way on the rise, and is now being used for more time, with more frequency than at any other time in our written language since it first became introduced, since the word vagina first became introduced into the language and replaced it as the name for the female body part, which happens in the 1700s. And so it's bizarre to me, but it got me thinking. And of course, in the backdrop of all of this, this incident happened in 2016. So it was the Trump election was going on as well. And the Access Hollywood tapes had just come out. And so I was thinking about, the way that the female body and female body parts were kind of being imagined in the political conversation, as well as the way they were being kind of slung as insults around the hallway. Anyway, so in an essay, I want to talk about those real incidents that happen and kind of turn them over in my head. And I think there's something about essay writing that, I might be obsessing about something, I'll start writing it down, and writing it down lets me get to the next level of thought. So I might be in my head kind of ranting, and then I write it down, and I'm just and another thing. It just lets me get to the next level. And that's what I love about the essay form.
Yeah, some say that they're used to you as a novelist, and they viewed it as, I read somewhere on the fabulous internet that writing essays was a departure for you. But
that's funny.
but How do you feel about, I mean, don't writers just write?
Yeah, I mean, that's funny to me because some of these essays were written before I started my first novel. So I've always been kind of writing essays along the side, but I guess what you publish first is what people think of you as. But yeah, and I mean, some of those essays were published first as well, but they flew under the radar. So
So with the, I want to circle back to the use of the C word. How
Mhm.
does that word come from something that basically, it's a word or a term that describes a body part to be one of the top 2 or 3 most offensive words you can possibly use?
Right.
How's that arc of that work?
Yeah, I mean, what it looked like is when I started getting into the etymology of it, that as soon as like vagina comes to replace it in medical texts and so forth and becomes the accepted terminology, then we start seeing the word for the body part being conflated, first like to talk about, trying to think how it goes, first to talk about I think women's behavior, but then like women who were maybe more sexually promiscuous, but then it becomes more broadly applied, and so you can see the word start to slip once and until it becomes an invective after that. But I think there's like it's something that I'm very curious about. Like, does having another word there as like the official word allow that word to become pitched at people in a different way, or what was it? But yeah, like there's something that seems like it was always there, that like a hatefulness that was like once it had access to that world, it like grappled with it, grabbed hold of it and just ran.
Yeah, I mean, I see that also with the B word. Now, there is no word that describes men's body parts that accelerates to this like supreme offensiveness. So is it just because of I'm not going to go as far as hatred toward women. Is it just because of the slant against women, how women are put down in society?
I mean, I think misogyny and power dynamics are definitely a part of it. Like I think it's difficult for something to have as much I guess I don't even know how to describe what I'm thinking, but I think if somebody has power from the start, like it's always punching up, right? It's never going to have the same power as a word that maybe punches down. Um, at least that's my suspicion.
Uh, John asks a writing question about how do you keep an essay from being simply using other people's opinions, and is it by basing it on personal experience or?
I mean, I think when I use other people's opinions a lot, but I'm also grappling with those opinions and testing them out and weighing them. And so I think that's part of it too, to be bringing in enough opinions that you get kind of a chorus of voices in the background of an essay. But yeah, having the personal experience to kind of test them out against might also help keep it grounded in the more personal voice.
Yeah. So you released 2 books in 2020.
Mhm.
What was it like sending books out into a world that the world was basically not out?
Yeah, it was super depressing. I am not gonna lie. um, the the books both made their debut at kind of the last AWP as the world was shutting down, and both of them had official release dates that were afterwards. And so I think like there were groups of people who were all publishing in 2020 who were trying to support each other and help promote the books that were out there, but at the end of the day, like I fully understood that people were not generally in a reading mood in 2020. They, it was kind of like we were in a national existential crisis,
Mhm.
and I think it was really hard to concentrate. I mean, I was struggling to get the reading that I wanted to do done, and so I wasn't going to fault anybody for not going out and picking up my book when they had, concerns about their family and their friends' health. I mean, it was just one of those that, I mean, all you could basically do is shrug and say, well, that was bad timing, but maybe people will find it later, or maybe they won't. But yeah, like I think it was one of those it is what it is situations.
And there were two wonderful books. One of them was A Heart Keeps Faulty Time, which is a book of short stories. And it's a very, very interesting subject matter in that you worked at. And the other one is a novel called Scrapple, which is a favorite word for those in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. So you're asked to do a live reading in 2020. It's the first live reading. COVID disappears in April of 2020. It was a flash in the pan. You're asked to read from these books. Which one do you pick?
What I tried to do was actually mix and match from them when I could. So I'd often, in fact, I just visited a university and did it was one of the first readings that I'd done live, really, since this had all happened, and it wasn't dedicated directly. Like some of the book launch stuff had been so tied to the sum of her parts that was the only one I read, but this one I was just invited to read, and so I read from all three, and I just picked bits, like here's a flash bit from a short story, here's the opening pages of Scrapple, here's an essay, and just kind of gave everybody a little piece of both.
And for folks not in that area, Scrapple is this brick of this kind of every innard or every like eyelid in it, and it's sliced like a loaf of bread, like a canned brown bread is, and then you fry each side of it. So the book itself, you've got abandoned babies and racism and bullying in it. So I know Scrapple is the food and the book takes place in Philly, but is it a metaphor of having everything in the book too?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think I think that kind of is at least I hope the central metaphor of the book is taking all of these experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, and mixing them up all together, and hopefully you get something that's kind of magical at the end of it. Because I am a Scrapple fan. I think it's kind of cool that you can take all these parts that on your own you'd be like, no, thank you. But you can.
I love Scrapple. My worst Scrapple experience was I found a piece of my own intestine in it, and it just was kind of, I was like, man, what happened there?
Yeah.
But the book of short stories too. All right, the book of short stories, there are clowns, aliens, mermaids, and dragons. And the review was, it spins the familiar on its heels. And I don't know about you, but clowns, aliens, mermaids, and dragons aren't familiar to you. So where in your mind do you pull that up?
God only knows. Like I can talk about the origin of some of them. Like the story that opens the collection started as I was walking down the street listening to a podcast, and it was talking about a thought experiment. And the thought experiment was that the idea was that like nuclear war is too abstract an idea, and it's too easy for a president just to decide, yeah, we'll go to nuclear war, like no big deal, like because it doesn't feel personal. And so the thought experiment was, would nuclear war be less likely if the codes for a nuclear launch were actually physically implanted in a human chest, so that the president would actually have to like kill the person to get the codes, was the idea. And it makes that one death so real, like would it actually make the death on the whole real? And I was like, that sounds like it could be a cool story idea. But then I thought, I don't think I'm the person to write that. I have no idea like what that story looks like. And then I saw a call for submissions from Barrel House magazine, and they had posted all these writing prompts. One of them was which was called the Stupid Idea Junk Drawer, and basically all of the editors at Barrel House had thrown in these ideas that they thought were too stupid to ever make a good short story out of. And one of them was clown parents disappointed in non-clown child. And I was like, that's the one I want to write. But then I couldn't decide why they were disappointed in the child. And so then at a certain point, I was like, well, what if I put that prompt together with the nuclear prompt? And anyways, long story short, it all got kind of bent around in my head until it became a flash fiction of its own called The Key Bearer's Parents. But so like, I guess the part that was familiar to me was that I had been a kid and I had been a parent. So like I knew that relationship and I knew the ways that we disappoint each other and the hopes that we have for our kids and how profound they are. And so I felt like I could write both sides of that relationship. So I think it's a mix of like the writing what you know in terms of knowing the emotional content of the story, but then letting your imagination run wild with maybe the facts in the story.
So it sounds to me like you get struck with story ideas, just like, is that a fair assessment?
Sometimes, I feel like when I describe my writing process, I feel like a magpie who just goes around picking up little glittery bits and seeing what I can make of them over time. Like, can I weave this into some weird nest, like this piece of foil and that piece of yarn or whatever it is. And so that's, I think I'm just always on the look for things that I find interesting.
Yeah, your first book, Borrowed Horses. So write what you know. Were you around a lot of horses? Did you train for an Olympic event? Because that involves an equestrian event.
Yeah, she's a better rider than I am, but I've definitely spent more than my fair share of time around horses, and I do love them. And so it's a combination. And I worked for a year for the U.S. equestrian team in Gladstone, New Jersey. And so I had gotten to see a lot of Olympians and aspiring Olympians up close and see their training. And so that's where that personal knowledge comes in.
All right, let's circle back to some of her parts. There's an essay in there about Sarah Winchester.
Yeah.
And Sarah Winchester, the whole myth and being haunted by the deaths of the Winchester repeating rifle, which you, how much research did you have to put into that particular essay?
That one had a lot. I read books, articles, everything I could get my hands on about Sarah Winchester and the house. I spent a lot of time on the website for the Winchester Mystery House and learning how they marketed it, looking at reviews. There's a book called Captive of the Labyrinth that I read that was very influential, where she kind of goes through, but it basically started because I'd seen an episode of a show that doesn't even exist anymore called America's Castles, and they talked about the Winchester Mystery House on there. And it was basically this story of this woman who was so racked with guilt over inheriting the money that was amassed from the Winchester rifle fortune, that she was like always trying to outrun these ghosts. But then the more research I did, the more I learned that actually wasn't the full truth. And there was a lot of speculation, and it became really fascinating to me, like why it is that we continue to invest so much money, because like millions of dollars are spent, going to that house and taking the tour and hearing the same story, which is largely invented. And so I was like, why is this story so important to us that we hang on to it?
It's the same up here in Salem with the witch trials.
Yeah.
Everyone goes there to party and they're celebrating this horrible, awful event that occurred.
Yeah.
And well, the interesting thing about Sarah Winchester is like she doesn't get much credit. She designed that whole house.
That's exactly right.
To the staircases, to the ornate everything.
Yeah.
So did you feel you uncovered the truth of it?
I don't know if there's a truth to uncover. I think what I was more interested in is just like this tension between like the story, the myth that gets passed along and the truth of it. I mean, she owned lots and lots of houses in the Bay Area, but that was the one that she put most of her architectural work on. And it seemed like there's something about her that was just really interested in the creative act of working on the architecture of the house. But that gets largely swept under the rug in the retellings.
So that is found in the sum of her parts. I want to thank Shane Griffiths for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
And these are her books again. And we talked, that is the most recent one, the sum of her parts. And we talked about all of these, and that's a nice Philadelphia skyline. But, you want to buy the sum of her parts because Shane did such a great job tonight. Just go to her website, and which is sbgriffiths.com. And it's always hard on Zoom because when you screen share, that little toolbar on top covers the address. So thank you so much once again. Folks that are watching the live stream on Facebook, thank you guys for watching as well. And if you want to come in, I will let you in. If you want to come in for the open mic, that would be great. You're always welcome. And Shane, thanks once more.
Thank you.